Hello. May and I are going to do this as a joint presentation, so we begin going back and forth, and we may talk amongst ourselves while we're doing this. It's supposed to be reasonably informal. But thank you for coming and listening on a cold and winter night. This started out with COVID as a presentation from me to senior doctors at St. Vincent's. I'm a consultation liaison psychiatrist there, and so I have a lot to do with the medical side of things. And there was a great deal of distress at the beginning, and mainly about not knowing what was going to happen. And I decided that nobody ever looks after the senior doctors, and so I would make it my business to do something which I hoped would be practical and would give them some immediate tips. Out of that, I had other people who then wanted to give the presentation, and then somebody put it into a module form. And at the end of this, you will get the link to this module, which I'm proud to say it looks really terrific and hopefully will be helpful. And I will mention along the way some things about it. And then May and I are both involved with the PHN on their mental health committee, and it was put to us that we should do something for the PHN, and we thought we'd do this together, and that's what you've got tonight. So I'm going to start. May's in charge of the slides and the quiz, but we'll be going back and forth between us. So this is COVID related, but it's also really for a lot of situations where you're dealing with crisis. This talk is really about you, although I think you'll see that some of this will relate to patients, clients that you have as well. And I understand that we've got a selection of GPs and some allied health people as well. So it's a combination. That's why we've called it Health Community Frontline. Next. So what we're going to be covering is how to use stress productively, knowing a little bit about what improves your immunity, winding down, knowing when you've got personal red flags that you need to do something. And we're going to be giving you some resources that you can use along the way. Next one. Now, there's a story about the frog that you put in cold water. As the water, if the water heats up, the frog doesn't realize and stays in the water and dies. And if you put the frog into hot water, it will jump straight out. Apparently, that's not actually true, but it's a very good metaphor all the same. I've been putting this one up, and then someone said, well, actually, frogs will jump up when the water gets hot.
I think we might be having some internet issues. May, you might need to take over for now. Sure. So Kay, I'm not sure if Kay's about to come. Kay, we lost you for just a moment there, but I think you might be back again.
Okay, it's got internet turn off webcam, so I don't think I can really turn off my webcam. Can I, or should I turn off the webcam?
Do you want to try turning off the video and then you might be able to just talk?
Yeah, because in fact, I'm not looking so beautiful with my purple light behind me, so it doesn't really matter very much.
I think we lost you just as you were talking about your frog analogy. So we might have lost Kay again. So Kay, I think we've lost Kay. Hello?
Yep.
Sorry, we'd lost you again, Kay. Kay, do you want to just try calling in and then we could see you and just have the phone audio go?
I'll just have to look and see how I call in.
Sure.
Hang on a minute.
Do you want me to move on to the next bit while you're working that on, Kay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So thanks everyone for And can I just say, I actually really like Kay's frog analogy. I know you, I know you didn't really get to hear the rest of what she was talking about, but I think in regards to this, I think it's just a reminder that sometimes we all get used to, as clinicians, dealing with lots of stress, and I think sometimes we're not actually quite aware of how much stress we're dealing with because of how used that we've become to dealing with it. And I hope that today we're going to talk more about how to make stress your friend and develop some good practices, which look on awareness about self and a good support network. So if there's any year to reflect on how we cope with stress, I think this is the year to do it, really. 2020 has been quite unprecedented with mega bushfires, floods, and now a pandemic. So as frontline clinicians, we've had a crucial and unique role in these events. For some of us, we might be working in quite different environments, altered from our usual practice, and these may have rapidly evolved to become so. Some of us, we or our families might have been directly affected, and so we might have actually also needed time away from duties. We all join the caring profession for a multitude of reasons. However, I suspect for most of us, we wouldn't actually be here if there wasn't a sense of altruism. If we didn't want in some way to make a difference or to care for the well-being of the community. So that sense of altruism or duty of purpose can be a really powerful motivating force. It can also contribute to the unique challenges to ourselves when we're in a disaster response or pandemic. It can lead us to forget how to care for ourselves or loved ones while we're caring for our community, particularly as the stakes seem higher or when resources are stretched. And internationally, there have been some reports of health worker suicide in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Including the Italian nurse, Daniela Trezzi, and Dr. Lorna Breen, who was an emergency physician in the front lines of New York. In both these situations, the system was overwhelmed. Besieged was the term used. There was a high workload with uncertainty with when this would end. And heart-wrenching decisions were being made regarding deservedness of care. And in the case of Daniela Trezzi, she'd been diagnosed positive with the COVID virus and was reported to be overwhelmed and fearful that she'd transmitted it to other people. And other clinicians report stories of isolating away from family to avoid risk of transmission of virus. So I actually raised these tragic examples as they highlight what we and the world is experiencing and what we hope to avoid by having this discussion. Working in healthcare can be stressful. Clinicians do often acclimatise to this. However, there's unique challenges in the current environment of the COVID-19 pandemic. And while I hope we don't experience what's occurring currently in some of the areas of the world, it's still incredibly pertinent with what's occurring right now in Melbourne, in New South Wales and the rest of Australia. We are all experiencing this. And we hope that by talking about it, we can reduce the stigma and shame that's culturally been prevalent regarding help seeking for mental well-being, particularly within health professionals. And at the end of today, we're also going to talk about resources, which can be part of mental well-being. So I'm going to ask you all to do a poll now. So I'm going to give you a moment to either go on the internet and type in this link, or if you've got your phone handy on you, there's the phone number that you can text, and you just text in Maysu474 once to join, and then it'll give you a list if you do it that way, where A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and each of those options you can answer. And I'm just going to just go into that poll, so just give me a moment while I do that. So, and we'll wait to see some of those responses. I'd love to see a response. It'd be great.
Can you hear me, May?
Yes, I can, Kay.
Good, 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 good.
Just let me know if you're having any difficulties with getting on. Okay. Look, if you are, oh, yay, we've got somebody responding. So I'm just going to give it a moment. And I think even for those who can't necessarily respond for whatever reason, I think maybe just an opportunity just to stop and reflect for yourself what you do when you're stressed as well.
If anyone's having any troubles as well, you can just pop it into the questions box and then we can read it out as well.
Great. Well, we're seeing a bit of a trend there. I love how it's very very much two responses which are coming out here. So I'm going to go back here. Just give me a moment while we're getting some more responses. I have to admit I'm a bit of an F myself. So yes.
I've got an A, B, and an E come through the questions as well.
Right. Yeah. I thought there'd be more E's actually, because I also empathized with that one. Okay. So we might go back here. Just give me a moment and I will find. There we go. So that was an interesting exercise. I find I was expecting more of a spread actually with that one than there was, but there certainly was a little bit of a trend there to the runners and the exercises. So that's great to see. I guess it's just a reminder that you never quite know what people are going to come up with about what they do for coping with stress, and we can all be a bit surprised by that actually, and it's easy to put our own assumptions about what we think of in terms of what somebody will do in terms of coping for stress. I mean, we all cope with stress in really different ways. Some of us are geared towards being solution focused. That's me. Some of us cope with food for the soul, which I still am. And sometimes the situation can be so overwhelming that not thinking about it is the default. So each of these strategies isn't necessarily worse than each other. However, some strategies might be more helpful in specific situations, and some of them can be harmful. So an example of this is in avoidance strategies. It's generally a strategy everyone uses at some point in time. It gives a breathing space and hopefully a time to recollect and regroup. Where it becomes less helpful is if the mechanism of avoidance causes harm, such as with just using a drink, which becomes a more frequent coping mechanism, or sometimes the only coping mechanism, or if the issue being avoided never gets addressed. Some of us may use sublimation as a coping strategy. Like, you might not have heard that term, but just to explain it, it's where the thing which is going on is so hard to think about that focusing on other productive activities as a way of coping is the way to go, such as work. So this is actually considered a mature coping strategy until it's not. For example, with when work is actually one of the causes of stress, or by focusing on this, the underlying issue never gets addressed. For many of us, the way we cope with things is dependent on patterns we've developed over time. Some of us have one style of coping, but may develop different styles to fit different circumstances. However, we might find that when we're overwhelmed, there's a tendency to fall back on those we've associated more in childhood or early development. And it's also important to note that we all cope with things differently. So one person may tend to want to fix things, the other might want to talk it out. Neither of those ways of coping is inherently bad. However, when interacting with two people who are trying to cope with different styles, this can sometimes cause confusion and conflict, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later. So in general, we just be aware that certain things might be more triggering for you. We all recognise that there are certain patterns which tend to set us off, or certain situations which tend to be more emotive for us. If you're finding that you're getting stuck or that you just can't work out what's going on, maybe get some external advice. Ask a partner or a friend if you just can't work out what's going on. Debrief by talking it over with a colleague and then just leave it at work. Develop and use support strategies. So maybe thinking about using a range of strategies for when one strategy is not always going to be helpful. Go easy on the alcohol, stay away from substances, including tobacco, and do some exercise every day. So I think a lot of you are going to identify with the exercise one. So I couldn't quite click on, oh, sorry.
May, I just mentioned about, go back to that one.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone's familiar with the Yerkes-Dodson curve, but
I was
the
just
point
trying to
of that,
click on it.
you were going to get on that?
Yeah, so I actually made this bigger so that we could have a
Right,
look.
okay. Good.
Did you want to talk to this, Kay?
No, that's all right. I just didn't want to overlook it. Go for it.
So as Kay was pointing out, I think we just need to bear in mind that stress isn't inherently bad. You know, to a certain extent, we do need some level of stress to function. And we're probably all in situations working in healthcare where we have experienced stress and we've recognized that at certain times it's actually helpful for us. That if we're too relaxed, it just doesn't actually get us being able to do things. I think the challenge that we have in a situation where there's lots and lots of stress and our baseline stress is incredibly high, that sometimes when we're overwhelmed, it actually impacts on how well that we're able to function and perform. The other, which Kay is going to go into, but there are some strategies which, in fact, Kay actually developed. The Black Dog Institute, oops, I just realized I'm not in a slide. Here, the quick relaxation techniques from the Black Dog Institute. If you have a chance, maybe just have a look at that, because I just think it's just a really well set up way of structuring a number of different quick strategies, and can help also work out what sort of strategies kind of align better with you as well.
And just to pursue that, so the reason the arrow is on that curve is that what you need to work out in whatever situation you're in is where you perform best on that curve. This is something that sports psychologists talk to people who are, preparing for a race or whatever, preparing for exams. But it's very important that you understand this yourself. And part of the, so I'm getting feedback while I'm talking, which is a bit weird. So at the end of in the module and at the end of this, I'll be talking about a TED talk called How to Make Stress Your Friend, in which the lady goes into all of this and actually mentions that when you are stressed, you put out oxytocin, which means that probably by nature we are developed to actually make bonds while we're under stress. But I'd encourage you to have a look at that TED talk, one of the 20 best popular TED talks of all time. Okay.
So continuing on with talking about identifying what kind of coping strategies that you tend to have a tendency towards with your coping style. Here are some suggestions about how you could set up some strategies which are more aligned with the kind of coping style that you have. And it's also helpful to note that we all work with people who might differ from us in this. So we might be conscious that within your team, a range of different strategies may also be helpful. So, and speaking of teams, so look, I keep talking about teams. Look, I think it is actually really important to remember that we don't exist just as an individual, and that we work in often groups and with other people. So work out who's actually in your team. It doesn't just mean who you get along with. Work out who you're interacting with. And we're focusing on the professional here, but you might have multiple teams that you're interacting with, including other professional groups, but also personal, so family and friends. And when things are tough, it's particularly important to have a uniting message. Kay refers it to putting on your safety belt. And it might sound kitsch, but particularly when things can be fraught, having a central motivating direction is crucial. This could be a team mission, or it could just be a general ethos. Check in on how everyone's going and listen for the response and work with this. Doesn't have to be judgmental, it's just recognizing where people are at and what things they may not necessarily be capable of at certain points in time, and that includes yourself. Work out when you're going to ask about this and how. And this can be particularly important in larger organisations or when people are working in different shifts or times, and you might actually need some sort of formalised process to enact this. When you're communicating, use clear, simple and consistent messaging. This helps to head off problems. But when problems do occur, don't avoid them, work out how to address them and early so that they don't become bigger problems, and acknowledge when things do go well. So remembering that we've checked in on our team, there might be some common patterns or things that you predict that might require more support. So for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, our team was having such frequent rapid communications, we had to set up a separate communication line for those of us involved in decision making and implementation of the changes. We also recognise that for some of the staff members, they just weren't coping with the high volume and rapidity of communication. So lines of communication had to change so that there were different groups of communication depending on purpose. Keep a culture of support and that it's okay to get support. And if it's not appropriate within the organisation, then establish how that's going to happen outside of the organisation. So just again, giving you an example, we've established a close relationship with one of our other local general practices, and staff are aware that they're welcome to attend confidentially for care with no out-of-pocket fee, and we have a similar relationship for them. Work out breaks. So when we're busy and stressed, just remembering that Yerkes-Dodson scale, it's going to affect performance. So you might want to schedule in more breaks in your day formally, but also more timeouts when you're not at work as well. And when you're not at work, self-care. Kay is about to share with you lots of helpful advice about strategies for this. So I'll leave you with her.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next one.
Mm-hmm. The next
Can
one?
you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, did you say next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the very first thing I'm going to talk about is breathing. When my mother was bringing me up, she would say, if I was ever upset, take a deep breath, and I never knew what she was talking about. But this is an article which I've put a link to in the module, which is talking about all the benefits of deep breathing, slow breathing for just normal people. And sorry, a bit of feedback again. I'll just have to talk over it. So it affects breathing and heart rate and blood pressure and immunity and all kinds of things. And on there and in the module, you will see a square breathing animation so that you can start with that little dot and follow it around. And you breathe. So the idea is that you breathe in and hold, breathe out and hold. But as I say, you'll get that on the module itself. But I encourage you to read that article. It's very interesting. And I actually prescribe to people that they do some deep breathing when they wake up and 3 times a day after meals. At times I've even prescribed it with a prescription pad to make the point that this is so important. We'll go on to the next slide. Now, I missed one, actually. I'm sorry. Could you go back to two before? I missed one. This one, sorry. No, next one. Somewhere, I've got a slide 10 in the middle. No, go down. That one. No. You keep missing it. Go back one. One more. That one.
There's not that one. Okay. Yes.
Right, overlook this one. At the start of the COVID pandemic, there was an article by Michael Mosley about the importance of sleep and what that does for immunity. It was a somewhat unsettling article, and in that it talks a lot about deep effects on mood and how this could in fact impact on people who were dealing directly with COVID. But sleep does have a profound effect, and he's actually now written a book about sleep if anyone's interested. And it's lovely to see some of you exercising, because that affects not only mood but cognition and sleep and immunity in itself. And eating, and I've been telling more and more patients about their microbiome and the importance of that. And I'm sure you're all aware that microbiome is now being thought of as a second brain. It seems to have an incredible impact on mood and cognition in its own right. So I encourage people to go away and find out a bit more about this and make sure they're eating well. And as a rule of thumb, avoid things in a packet and use a Mediterranean diet. Some Asian diets are good too. But when I looked into the Mediterranean diet, it's actually the Mediterranean diet of the 1960s, again, before they had too much packaged food. And it's all about fresh fruit and vegetables, olive oil and citrus, and plenty of water, and you can have a modicum of wine in there too. Again, I've got some articles about that. Tuning out on social media, I think this is probably more an issue for some patients than for us, but getting people to not just keep listening all the time to the bad news, I think is very important, and it isn't very helpful. I assume that you're all aware that smoking increases your insulin resistance. I mean, it does so many things that are bad. It also actually influences your microbiome as well, which is worth knowing. And when I've given this talk to busy doctors, I've talked to them about not abusing substances and alcohol when they've come off a high arousal shift or round of some kind. And we will come back to winding down a bit later. And just to remember that we are all models for the people around us. There's a lady, psychiatrist in America, Erica somebody, who's written a lot of articles about doctors and their own habits affecting what they do with their patients. So if a doctor has stopped smoking or is exercising or has had their cholesterol checked, they're far more likely to talk to their patients about it, and they're also a fantastic model for it. So I can't say any better than the poster that I've got there. And there's the article down there that you can click on that is in the module as well. Next one. Now we're going over the slow breathing. We go and we're on to this one. This is just talking about diaphragmatic breathing as opposed to slow breathing. But in fact, they're doing exactly the same thing. And I've put in the hold in between. It might be interesting for you to know, and it's mentioned in that article, that if you breathe at the magic 6 cycles a minute, it actually does amazing things to you in general. And they've actually looked at, done a study of people using worry beads, rosary beads, the beads that Muslims use and yogis use, and they all are actually timed. They've actually all come from each other if you follow the chain of it. But using any of those beads, you actually breathe at 6 cycles a minute if you're doing them properly. And when you do that, you get all the health benefits that that article talks about. You synchronize your respiratory rate with an innate cardiac rhythm, and your parasympathetic nervous system takes over, and it just gives you this incredible sense of calm and makes you much more open to just the beauty around you, transcendental experiences, etc. Down there also is a link to an ABC site if you want to listen to that or get patients to listen to it. It's something, I think it's easier at times to have someone talking to you about this than just reading it. Next one. Now, this is just running through some techniques that are all evidence-based, and I presume you all know, but sometimes we forget about, and we forget to use them ourselves. These little cards are cards that I've actually made that I give out to my patients, and we could make them available to some people if they wish, and they are all in the module. But muscle relaxation is just the progressive tensing and then relaxing of muscles. And we will come back to this later in the sleep induction. But just to say, once you've got used to that technique, the simple thing to do and the quick one is to just relax your jaw, your shoulders, and your wrists. Now, obviously, you have to practice this, but it is absolutely impossible to be tense if you've relaxed those things. Impossible. So it's a really good thing to get used to doing. And this is the sort of thing that, say, if you've got a team, you can do some of these things at the beginning of the day. Just practice doing these, or in a break can be really helpful. And I've given you a little rating scale, and that's also on the page that May is talking about. And the idea is you try them all out and give them a rating out of 10 and see which one seems to fit you the best. Next one. Next. Nice. Now, I've put in, this is a card about diffusing anger. Anger is something that tends to pop up when people are tired and when there's a lot going on and they're getting frustrated. And a lot of what we're talking about here is trying to give everybody, you and the team, whoever you're working with, a sense of having some control in a situation that may at times feel as though it's incontrollable. And a lot of these techniques have got a bit of a mindfulness bend to them, the idea being that you sort of become aware of the situation and just take a step back from it rather than getting caught up. And I actually give people the metaphor or an analogy of whatever it is of a tornado, that you can see the tornado coming and you can stand there and the tornado will envelop you, and then you've got to spend all your time just trying to get out of the tornado. Or you can notice it coming and then move away from it and watch it go past. And this is the same sort of thing they're talking about here with anger, is be aware of it, relax your jaw and your shoulders and breathe, and then ask yourself those questions and find some answers to it rather than getting too caught up in it. Anyway, I'd really encourage you to give that a go, and we'll go on to the next one. Now, this is a really helpful technique that sort of segues in from the anger. This is a guy who May and I both have as a hero called Daniel Siegel. He's a neuropsychiatrist from America, but he actually talks a lot of sense. A lot of Americans use too many words, I find, but he's much more succinct. This is a very interesting technique, and he's got some books and he's got some stuff on YouTube if you're interested. But the idea is that you think about your thumb as your amygdala, and it's got a diagram there, and your fingers as your prefrontal cortex. And you wrap, when you're very upset, you wrap your fingers around your thumb and visualize the prefrontal cortex and what that does, and the fact that it's for emotional modulation and for executive function. And he's got a little video, which again is on this module that I'm talking about, and I really encourage you to watch it. It's 2 minutes. And he explains this really well. And this is a technique you can use yourself, you can use with, say, other people, and you can even talk to your family about. I think this is something that even kids can relate to, and it's a really helpful technique. So please give it a go.
I'd probably also say that Dan's got some really, Dan Segal's got some really helpful things also for kids and for parents as well. So just saying.
Yeah. Well, he's written a book called Mindsight, which is more about adults, and it's a big plug for mindfulness, but he talks about emotional regulation and how that fits together with sort of brain and body. He's got another book called A Brainstorm, which is about adolescent brains, and if any of you are struggling with adolescence, I encourage you to read it. And he's got some parenting courses, and he's got some screenshot, just some sort of short videos about attachment style, all sorts of things. He's a great communicator.
He's got books for children as well, The Whole Brain Child, which I think is a really excellent book as well. So, I realise that we both really like him. So, yes.
But we like him because he's sensible. He's obviously well informed, but he puts things. He's a great communicator of complex ideas.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we're both sold. We move on to the next one. So when you've done your relaxation or your de-escalation, the next thing to put up here as an evidence-based technique is problem solving. So you can see the first two are more about emotional modulation, and these ones are more about problem solving, solution focus. And this, again, is something you can do yourself. You can make anything into a problem to solve. The hardest bit is actually getting the right problem. So it's got to be some problem where there's some achievable outcome. And I think it's something you can do with your team. You can do, at times you can get patients. You can teach them this technique, get them to go away and problem solve something themselves and bring it back. And so it's about generating different options, looking to see what are the pros and cons of each of them and trying one out and not being afraid to fail. If that one doesn't work, the idea is you go back and try another approach. But it's a really helpful, simple technique and it has multiple applications. Do you use this, May, at all?
I do. And I think what I think is also helpful to remember is that I think sometimes when we're all well, we do some of these things intrinsically and we don't think about how we do it. But sometimes when we're not feeling so overwhelmed, we sometimes forget to break it down and do some of these things a little bit more deliberately.
Yeah, again, so the metaphor I give here is if you want to climb Mount Everest and you look at Mount Everest, you'll never get up there. But you'll think that's too hard. But if you really want to climb Mount Everest, you've got to think about what equipment you need and who you're going to take with you and where the base camps are and how much food you're going to need and etc. And if you really want to do it, you'll do it. But that's the breaking down into the different. I'm getting the feedback again. Could we go on to the goal setting?
Yeah.
Next one. So this is the other part of it, is your problem solving is one thing and then having some goals to achieve. And we have some sheets that we give out, and some of these on the Black Dog website as well, I'm pretty sure. And you can make up your own if you need to, but looking for goals that are what is the SMART goals: smart, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And I've given you some questions to ask about each of those. And again, you can use this with your team. You can, if you've got even people in the team and who need to go away and solve a problem, you can give them some of these things to go away and come back with a solution. So, and people can do it in a break, but obviously you've got to have been used to doing it so that it can come automatically when you need it. Next one. And this is one of my favourite cards, and it's one of the favourite cards of other people. The story of the two wolves, about an old Cherokee telling his grandson that life is a battle between two wolves, one embodying all the good things and one all the bad things, and the grandson asking which wolf wins, and the man saying the one you feed. I actually use this as a bit of a cognitive test with patients and say, what does that mean to you? It's actually quite a good test of abstract thinking. But the real use of it, and I must say I use this myself, is to just say, feed the other wolf when you're feeling down or you're having a bad time. And that's something, again, that if you're in a busy situation or you're feeling really lousy yourself, you can just take yourself out for a minute and say, come on, just feed the other wolf. So I'd strongly recommend you give that one a go as well. But they're saying a few people don't get it. Most people find that really helpful. Next one. So they're all things that you can do in an acute situation. And then having got out of an acute situation, obviously then you've got to start having ways of winding yourself down again. And this means attending to your self-care and being able to reflect. And we're going to go into a few of those. Can we go on to the next one? This is my other favorite card myself. The wolves and this one are my favorites of these cards. And I should say one of my patients did that photograph, which is so beautiful. I had to put it somewhere. And I got this off a website for busy GPs, which was from the BMJ, and saying, look, if you're really overwhelmed, shut the door for 1 minute and do this. And I really encourage you to give this one a go. I use this one again myself, and if any patients of mine want to do it, I do it with them too. In 1 minute, you can make yourself feel absolutely amazingly calm by doing this. Again, you've got to get used to it, but I just cannot overstate how useful this is once you've got used to doing it. And as you can see, it takes 1 minute. I must say, though, I've done this at workshops for GPs and got them to do this, and they've said, wow, that's fantastic. And then I've said, how are you going to introduce that into your own life? And they say, I haven't got time. And I say to them, well, if you can't introduce 1 minute of something that's going to be good for you into your own life, how do you expect your patients to do it? So I draw that to your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and that one's also on the Black Dog website, but it's also in the module. Can we go on? Now, this one is about looking at things the other way again, and something we don't do enough of is to just look at the positives. Now, this is really a gratitude exercise, and there's actually a lot of research saying that gratitude is really good for your immunity. It just gives you this feeling of well-being and a bit more control. But there's quite a literature that it actually is really good for your health. So this is just a simple exercise you can do yourself. You can do at the end of a day with your team. You can do with your kids. And it's just looking at the good things that have happened. So I'd commend you to try that one as well. And the next one. Now, this is about what you can also do, saying putting your thoughts to bed. And I've taken this from an article, which I've given you the reference to. But the idea is, at the end of the day, you just write down the things you want to remember for tomorrow, the 3 top things, anything that went well today, and you can use the gratitude card for that if you wish. Things you need to let go of. Again, writing them down helps you let them go. And just a happy thought if you want one. But if you get used into the practice of doing that, it does give your brain a rest. Now, we actually use a technique called expressive writing, which is not quite the same. It's actually writing for several days in a row about events that are traumatic or are causing you a lot of emotionality. And in fact, there's an article there, the second one down there, about health benefits, which I actually wrote 15 years ago. It's still one of the top articles in terms of citations, which is very interesting. But believe it or not, they have done these writing studies, and you can change people's CD4 count, lymphocyte counts. I mean, it literally helps your immunity. And it's all got to do with getting rid of a lot of the arousal, making things into a narrative and sort of owning them, and feeling as though you've got more control over the situation. But I really encourage you to try the journaling, and you can, if you've got a lot on your mind, you can think about using the expressive writing as well. And you could read the second article on there, which is, again, in the module's got the chapter which I've written, but the second one is probably easier to read and to put on with. And if anyone's interested, there is a book that you can download and get online about opening up expressive writing. Next one. Now, in the module, there are 6 different exercises that you can use. This one about putting your legs up the wall is really helpful if you've been sitting down all day and gets the stretch out. Anyone who's done yoga will be familiar with some of them, but in the module it's got the whole 6 there in a line that you can do, and they are expressly to help you unwind and get to bed. Next one. I looked up to see what might be useful in military situations, thinking if people are busy and stressed, it's a bit like similar kind of high arousal. And this is what the Armed Forces in America, it's one of the things they've suggested. And I've given you a link to a site which talks about a number of ways of getting to sleep fast. But this one uses the same technique as the muscle relaxation technique, relaxing your tongue, your jaws, your eyes, then your shoulders, etc., and visualizing whichever of those is helpful or whatever else is helpful like that. And if thoughts come back into your mind, you don't fight them, you just let them go. And this is having this sense of control. You don't say, I mustn't think that thought. You just say, I'm going to let it go. And you need to practice that. But that's a very helpful technique. Next one. Now that's enough about winding down. This is now more about personal red flags and what do you need to be concerned about. Do you want to take over there again, May, or shall I keep going?
Okay. Look, I'm happy either way.
Yep. I'll let you take over again.
Look, I guess this is just a reminder that sometimes when we're so busy, I was thinking about this as Kay was talking about the doctor who said they just didn't have time to do the 1 minute relaxation. And it's this common thing that sometimes when we're busy and overwhelmed, we just don't stop. And sometimes we don't stop to actually stop and check if we're okay. So I think sometimes when we are getting overwhelmed, it's actually even more important for us to actually schedule in some time about when we're going to actually do that. And to a certain extent, us taking that time actually gives us more time back, because when we look at things about why they're not working well, we actually do what we need to do more effectively and can look after ourselves and our patients much more effectively. So one suggestion which you could do is to actually think about your day as kind of a personal marker. So at the start of the day and at the end of the day, that's your time to think, are you okay? For some of us, it can be a little bit hard to be objective about our own emotions, but maybe stop and think about how you are feeling it. For some people, it might be more physical sensations. You know, are you feeling like you're more physically tense, or are you emotionally feeling like you're more irritable or angry or responding to things you wouldn't otherwise respond to, or similarly getting teary at things you wouldn't necessarily respond to? Am I actually allowing myself time to do the things I need to keep well, to eat, to drink, to rest? Who's watching my back about this? At the end of the day, factor in, am I factoring enough exercise, downtime, sleeping? What of these techniques would help me cope better? How do I get additional supports if I need to as well?
And so you can actually have a buddy, you know, you can watch their back and they can watch yours and make sure that these questions are being answered for each other.
I probably also think that this reflects in terms of our professional days and our working days, but you know, I actually think just generally as part of our journeys of looking forward, sometimes it's also helpful to have kind of reflection times where you also check in on overall how things are going, not just for the day, but overall in terms of your team, your workplace, and what else is going on. Because sometimes we don't necessarily stop to think about the bigger picture things as well. And I guess, you know, we have talked about this a bit. You know, we've talked about teams, and I keep coming back to this because we don't work in isolation. Like just as Kay was saying, it's good to have a buddy. It's also good to have a functional team working together. And when we are overwhelmed, we don't always interact with each other the way that we normally would. So you might be able to think of some examples you might have experienced in the past, or that unfortunately might be happening for you, but maybe we can think about some ways to manage it. First of all, it's probably important to recognise why it's happening. It can sometimes be that there might be lots of different reasons why the situation might be occurring, and sometimes it can be really hard to understand that when you're in the middle of it, particularly when there's lots of emotions which are actually happening. When we're stressed and overwhelmed, it's more likely, and that makes us kind of less attuned sometimes to stopping and reflecting and thinking about our own emotions and what's at play. So try to recognize, first of all, that things aren't going well. Sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it can be a bit of an ambiguous feeling. So that's why those check-ins are really important. See it as a problem often associated with groups or teams under stress rather than blaming individuals. Don't automatically believe what you hear. Maybe just stop. Try to consider the various points of view or what's occurring and what might be the systemic issues as to what's occurring, as to a he said, she said sort of thing. You don't have to agree with each other, but you can respect that people are going to have differences of opinion and different ways of interacting. Just as Kay was talking about, with the, trying to avoid the tornado of response, try to avoid extreme responses to what might be occurring. Recognize that there might be emotions which are occurring. Maybe try to step back, acknowledge that those emotions are happening, but rather than colluding with the emotional response, because I think emotions are very catchy and we can get caught up in these, recognize that those emotions are occurring and try to actually think more about how we might work together to manage that rather than split. Sometimes working out, working out what the problem is probably really crucial here, because then you can look at how you then develop the solutions, which might be a combination of being supportive, but also having clear boundaries about what is occurring. You might have a mentor or you might have a supervisor who you can get some support from, or you might have, somebody in the managerial sort of sphere, like a practice manager who may have some training in terms of how to manage this. HR, people with human resources sort of expertise can sometimes be quite helpful.
Can I just mention something here, May, about anger? I mean, we've talked about a little bit. People are afraid of anger, but one of the things is that people never think about is what's the function of anger. And it is there to build up a bit of energy to push through something. And I think at times reframing it, that let's use the anger in the room in a constructive way, can be a good way of getting through that. And that really gets back to that card about standing back and looking at it instead of getting too involved in it. That can help, I think, at times.
That's a really good point. And I think sometimes we get really scared of emotion without actually recognizing that the emotion's there for a reason. But we just don't want the emotion to be the only thing in the room.
Yeah. And at the times, also at the moment, people, particularly around COVID, are scared, and that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as you do something with it, you don't just get scared, but you try and use that in some way that's productive.
Yeah. One of the things that Kay and I were talking about was that I think sometimes with the kind of work that we're working, some of you may be working in private practice and you may have some organized systems for how this works, but some of us may not necessarily have formalized process for how this works. So you might be still developing some of those processes as well. But, I think just bearing in mind that, if we stop and think about why the situation is occurring, there will be a solution that can hopefully move people forward. So know your strengths, know what works for you. As Kay was saying, learn to use your stress productively. And look, there is a bit of planning which involves, like, I think sometimes we can be a bit reactive and we can just respond to situations as they occur to us. But there is some predictability about some patterns which may occur. Like, for example, you know, if you know that certain things can be triggering for yourself or for other people, maybe plan for that and head that off and work out how you might manage that in advance before it becomes actually a problem. Be reflective. Stop and think at certain times, and you might actually have to schedule that into your day. Certainly, the busier that I've gotten, I've had to have more formalized processes about where I can be reflective, and develop sustainable strategies to maintain good practice. So you might have to develop some new strategies for different situations. Know when you need to get support and assistance, and we're going to talk about some avenues for support as well. And you can't look after other people if you're not looking after yourself. So this is a summarization of those things that we were talking about, which Kay's already talked about in such that I might talk now about some of the other resources which are available. So we've talked a lot about teams and we've talked about challenges with teams. Look, I think I also want to remind you how much of a strength that your teams can be, and that debriefing can be quite helpful. That's not to say that you're forced to talk about everything if you know, that if it's that everything in unhelpful supportive ways, but debriefing in a way that it helps you work out ways that you can move forward in terms of addressing the challenges which are occurring. So it might be talking about particular emotional stressors and challenges, it might be getting some practical tips and solutions, but there's no doubt that having that in a non-judgmental form is a really important way of us actually being able to care for ourselves, care for our colleagues, care for our patients. There's different ways that we can do this. Kay and I were actually talking about this when we were talking about what resources were available, and I actually realised that we did have some resources which were available for health practitioners who are medicos, but we actually didn't have as much which was available for those who are nurses or allied health. So we'd really love to hear from you about what avenues may also be out there for you. I know for psychologists that they may need to have that it's actually required that they have peer supervision, and I know that there are other groups of practitioners where that's important as well. In general practice, we have a couple of groups like Ballant-like groups. I know Kay is involved with a peer support group, and I'm involved with one as well, which I'm happy to be contacted about. I'm sure we're both happy to be contacted about
Yep.
after this. If you wanted to talk about more one-on-one counselling, there's a number of services which are available, and I've included those which are available for medicos. But again, I'd be really interested to hear about what's available for other profession-specific supports. Or you can speak to your local general practitioner or psychologist or psychiatrist, depending on what your needs may be as well. There are some online resources as well, which we've got there, which is My Compass Online and the Black Dog Institute, Beyond Blue and Reach Out and Smiling Mind, and Kay is going to talk a little bit to that as well. Look, I guess we're talking about here about peer support and psychological support. I think we should also remember that sometimes some of the other things which are affecting us are also outside of our professional, it might be outside of the realm of that. And sometimes it could be personal and financial difficulties which are occurring. Certainly for doctors, there are a couple of organisations which help to support for those specific needs. It might be that there are medico-legal or work-related stressors, and so there are specific supports which help for that. And there are specific peer groups which may exist. So for people who are having specific stressors around pregnancy or perinatal, there's PANDA, or in New South Wales, we've also got the Gidget Foundation as well. There are specific Indigenous doctors associations as well, and there may be similar groups as well for other professions. We have a Doctors with Disabilities group, and there are also LGBTI specific and rural specific groups as well. I guess in terms of this, I mean, some of these are more formalized groups, but we haven't even spoken about, you know, some of the other social media groups which exist. Like within general practice, there are some specific professional groups which do exist as well on social media. So GPs Down Under is a specific Facebook group which exists as well as just a community of support as well. So there are a number of options which are out there which look in terms of creating a community of support. So, and Kay, I'm going to...
Are you moving the slides on? Are you moving on the slides?
So I was going to leave this one to you. Do you want me to do next, or are we going to talk to this one?
No, I thought you've pretty much talked to that one.
Sure.
Keep going.
All right.
You've talked about some of the resources.
Yep.
Keep going.
So, sorry, Kay, are you talking to this, or do you want me to?
No, I think you've talked to it.
Okay, good. So we're going to do another poll.
No, what I've got is it's got stuck on summary. Have you talked your way through the others and moved them? Because they haven't moved on my machine.
Oh, yes, I have. So
they're just not moving on mine. Can I say then that on slide 32, which I can't see, there is the module that I'm talking about, which is called Staying Sane for Teams.
Yes.
And if you click on that link, you will get to the module, and it has a lot of this material on it in a form that you can just have on your iPhone. It's got, and it's also got in a more animated form. So I'd really, and it's one of the kind of rewards for sitting through this tonight is to get hold of that, and having us talk, though, I think makes the module make more sense. The other thing, which, and I can't see if May has showed you, this is the This Way Up website, which has got some programs on it which you're welcome to use yourself and patients can use, and they are free of charge while COVID is on. It's got the whatever that code is called that you can hold your phone up to, and it's got short ones on mindfulness and insomnia, which are excellent, but it has got some more structured programs for depression, anxiety disorders, etc., and a COVID-specific program. And the last slide there is about some different resources that you are very welcome to avail yourselves on. And again, some of those are on the module, and you can actually click and get onto the articles. And I'd love to hear from you about the module if you find it helpful. I think I've put my email address down there.
I don't know actually if it is actually, Kay.
On that one.
No,
okay.
but maybe we can ask her to share that.
All right. And I'll leave you to the poll.
And we had a poll, so I'm just going to get into the poll, which, let me just give you a moment.
And we can't hear anything from you except if you put in a chat item. So we are interested in what you all find helpful in all of this.
So, which I'm going to emphasize, would love to hear back about how you found this talk. And I think just as a means of reflection, this also is what we call a word map. So you might have come across this before. So I'm going to just ask you to write in a free form, even just a word or a phrase about what are you most likely to implement now to improve your own mental well-being. And then we might see what comes up about what people feel that they might change based on what they reflected on after today. And I know that we were scheduled to finish at 7:30, but I guess I just want to know, like, if, oh, sorry, 8:30, sorry. Otherwise we missed that time.
We haven't got that far over time.
That's right. But look, Kay and I are both happy to answer any questions. So, you know, if you've got any things that you want to ask us about, please write it in the chat, and we're really happy to, you know, talk about stuff. Oh, beautiful. It's lovely to hear that.
I've just put my email address there if anyone's interested.
Kay, they might not see the email address in the chat. That comes just to us. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful. There's a lot about being grateful and breathing. Exercise comes up high. I think a lot of people really resonate with exercise.
I've been asked to rejoin. I've gone off it altogether.
May, there is one answer in a question box on daily mindfulness.
Great, daily mindfulness. And I've got here how to maintain moving forward. Okay, we've had a question, I think, Kay. Just let me have a quick look.
Oh, I love the map.
So we've had a question here about how to maintain moving forward attitude during current uncertain times, especially when we're facing the second round of lockdown. And, you know, thank you for that person who's posted it, that question. I think it's a really important question, particularly at this time. And I think we need to be mindful that I think we forget that with everything going on, there is a certain level of fatigue which arises from the fact that we have been in this heightened state of affairs, not just throughout the COVID pandemic, but even before, through the bushfires and then the floods as well. I think it's also, sorry, Kay, were you going to speak to that, or?
I'll talk when you've finished.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember and reflect that it's okay for us to feel fatigued and okay for us to not always feel like moving forward, and to take those times out for ourselves as well, because the only way to actually rest from fatigue is sometimes to have a little bit of a break. Having said that, I think in terms of the moving forward attitude and wanting to get back towards that, I think the reason that question's being asked is because it's pretty hard to take a break in the middle of a pandemic for an extended period of time. And so I think in regards to that, I think we all have our own things which kind of help to sustain us when we you know, I guess we talked about coping strategies and things which keep helping us going. And for some people, it's, you know, if you're emotive, it might be that the thing which keeps you going is that, you know, you want to make sure that it's safer for your friends or your loved ones. For, you know, for some people, it's about wanting to make sure that you are doing something particularly for the community or for something else. Remember your driving message. Remember the thing as to why you're doing this in the first place. And remember that you won't be able to be there 100%. So prioritize and work out what are the things that you most need to do, and what are the things which are going to allow you space to breathe, to be able to do those things that you prioritize. It's a marathon, it's not a race.
Well, just from the things that we've got there, I think setting some goals for during COVID and after COVID, different goals, is helpful. Using the journaling, and again, that's getting you to reflect and also to make some goals and think ahead. I think exercises people are doing is incredibly important, and there is all kinds of exercise. At the moment, I'm doing online Tai Chi, and I think doing some online things can be very helpful. But exercising in nature, under trees and by the sea, has got an extra dimension that is incredibly helpful, and music can be very helpful. So I think it's a matter of working out what you need to do in the middle of a crisis, and when it's sort of just going on and on and on, and what you're going to do when it's finished, and having those two different sets of goals to help you move forward. But having the reflection time as well and giving yourself permission to do that is incredibly important, as May said. And sleep.
I've started online Tai Chi as well, by the way, Kay. We have a lot of similarities, the two of us. So we keep realising this. So.
It's good. Well, one of the things about Tai Chi is that you have to turn around a lot. I do Taoist Tai Chi, and I couldn't do it online because you've got to keep looking backwards. But I found somebody who actually does it. He's doing it in such a way that you're facing in one direction all the time, which is really helpful. And there is a lot of good stuff actually online out there now. Some amazing stuff.
Yeah. It's. I think that's another thing which kind of helps us to move forward. I think remembering that there have been lots of changes. The world is a different place. I don't think all of those changes are bad, though. Like, I think the world may be quite a different place after COVID, but some of those things were probably things which needed to happen anyway. They've just happened much more rapidly. And we've obviously just had to come along with that, not necessarily willingly or planning for this at the time. Okay, we've had another question as well. So any suggestions for keeping the team motivated and together online when we've been working from home since March, facing issues of isolation, depression, and loneliness? Okay, I'm going to let you answer first, actually.
I think that's a really important one. And again, I'd go back to having some short-term sort of daily things and people checking in, but you don't want to spend your whole time asking everyone if they're okay. I think having some team jokes, some team sort of secret business of whatever kind suits the time and the place. And I'm saying like jokes or just something that's sort of known to the team but not outside, whatever it is. And probably being able to do what May's just said, take what's good and even start having a conversation about what's good and you want to continue after COVID and what's not. And again, having some short and long-term goals. And I always like to have a plan, even if it's not the greatest plan. I really think it gives you more of a sense of control if you've got a plan and if you've got things you can tick off. And I like making a daily list and putting things on it that I know I'm going to do just so I can tick them off. But I think it is important for a team too. And having some ring-ins or some daily hookups in some way so that people, partly so you can see what they're all doing and partly just to make people feel that they're not out there on their own. But if anyone else has got any ideas, I would love you to put them on the chat as well, because that is a very important area. And I think people are just getting a bit over it. It was all right for a little while, but they're getting a bit over it. I think what I miss when I haven't actually spent very much time at home, but what you miss is the chat with someone that you bump into, that you've been meaning to talk to, and you probably wouldn't have contacted them, but you bump into them and then you say, I've been meaning to talk to you. And it's that kind of informal interaction which I think is missed and is very binding. Over to you, May.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as you were talking, because I think this is a really important point, because it actually has two issues. One is about isolation and loneliness, and the other issue about what is the context about online interaction. And there have been some studies about what has changed about online interaction, and there's no doubt it's not the same as actually just seeing somebody face to face. I think we forget how important touch is. We forget how important, as Kay was saying, that kind of incidental social engagement which occurs, which is non-planned, that is non-professional, that actually builds on the relationship, which is very important in a work relationship. And I think we also forget that if we're interacting online, it actually gets pretty fatiguing to do online interaction. You know, you miss out on some of the interactivity. There are the technical issues which occur, which, you know, I think we can probably attest to tonight. You know, as much as you want, it's not always smooth. And I think there is something a bit strange about seeing your own face when you're interacting to somebody, which I think puts us a little bit all on edge as well. There have been some suggestions about how we actually manage that. I mean, one could be that you try not to see your own face when you're interacting. So depending on the medium that you're interacting with, you can actually minimize your own face in that and see the other person's face, which does seem to help the interaction. The other thing is that some of the interactions don't necessarily have to be all video. So I think working out what type of interaction you're trying to achieve sometimes helps with some of the fatigue which may occur with some of the types of interactions which are occurring if you're only working in an online environment. So you're going to want to have some video interaction, but some of the interaction is going to be by phone, some of it's going to be through messaging and texting. So you're not kind of on all the time, which I think can be one of the challenges about working in a completely online environment. The other things which do come up is about then the isolation and the loneliness which does occur. And I think this also depends on who else is in your team, particularly if you're totally online, about whether you have what scope of other people are in your team outside of that. And I think really what we're talking about are those incidental interactions, which are non-professional based. How do you help that come along? There are different ways that you can approach that. I mean, some teams actually schedule in having informal interactions formally, which I know sounds really weird, but you know, they kind of schedule in tea breaks or you know, times out where they don't talk about work, but they just talk about other things. They may schedule in having kind of other sort of social engagements which occur, or there may be times where they interact in that informal way at the beginning of the meeting or after the meeting. So having a little bit more fluidity and relaxation with the type of interactions which might occur online, so that you're not always in a formalized setting, because those other interactions are actually important as well.
And you can also inject a bit of fun, like people have a saying for the day or have a theme or put up things they've found about the best way of doing yoga sitting down, or best recipe they've tried, you know. But you can have something that I'm talking about, having things within the team that are a little bit of fun that people can inject into it. And I think that can help with the team spirit as well. At St. Vincent's, we came up with a thing of having, I can't remember what it was now, Moving Monday and Wise Wednesday. And so on Moving Monday, we'd put up something that was an exercise people could do. Wise Wednesday, you know, the sort of sayings that you get on the bottom of your calendar on your desk, but things that people can all join into equally, that can be a bit of fun. Having some topic to talk about, but just something that in that 5 minutes beginning at the end makes it more a bit more human.
Yeah, that human nature, I think, is what I think a lot of us miss, isn't it?
And the other thing, it can be things like ideas for the weekend or things that you can do on your own, or you know, there are a lot of things online like tours of museums and things that people could put up on a site, different things that they've found good, or a movie they've seen, but things that can other people can then use and use to comment on, feedback on. Has anyone else got any ideas?
Yeah. So
right.
I'm going to say thank you so much for those further questions. I think they were really excellent questions to bring up, and I think very pertinent to what we're all experiencing at the moment. And look, thank you also for all the excellent engagement we had with the polls. It's really wonderful to see what people have posted. I hope you found this really helpful for yourselves moving forward, for yourselves and who's part of your team. And please feel free to get in contact with Kay or myself. I'm quite happy to share my email as well once we work out how to share it with you with any further questions. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you from me too.